This lesson is called Bringing Back the King, and it's after the rebellion is over. Absalom is now dead, and they're bringing David back, restoring him to his rightful place as king again. Comes from the 19th chapter of 2 Samuel. It was a very tragic event in David's life, but David has survived the most serious challenge to his leadership, not only because of his relationship with God, but because of the friends with which he surrounded him. Show me your friends, I will show you your future. We come like the people that we surround ourselves with. This is what's happening in David's life because of these friends, and it was a very unique, unusual group of people. So let me show you what I'm talking about. There's 5 different groups of people that I see as friends that he surrounds himself with. We're no stronger than the people who surround us. And so I see some leaders make this mistake. They choose weak people to surround themselves with because weak people will always do whatever you want them to do. Weak people are no challenge to your leadership. However, there's a problem. The problem is when you get in trouble, weak people are still weak and they can't help you. And that's what happens many times to people that surround themselves with weak leaders. David didn't do that. David surrounded himself with some strong leaders, people that were willing to confront him, to challenge him, but it was because of this strong group of friends he was able to overcome the problem like Absalom trying to kill him. Let's talk about these men. The first one that I'm going to talk about, I call it Reward the Stranger. It's a very unique friend in David's life. Reward the stranger. The stranger in this story is a man by the name of Ittai. Ittai was a Philistine who came to live in Israel. We don't know when he developed his relationship with David. It could have been when David was fleeing from King Saul and went to dwell in the land of the Philistines. All we know, the Bible describes Ittai as being a Philistine from the city of, or called him a Ittai the Gittite, that's the way they said it. Ittai the Gittite. Gittite literally meant a man from Gath. Anybody remember the town of Gath? Gath was the hometown of Goliath. So, this is where Ittai comes from. It's very interesting. The day that Absalom is trying to kill David, David puts 1/3 of his army under the control of a Philistine general by the name of Ittai. Now, that just I don't know what that does for you, but for me, that is a very shocking piece of information. How could he trust a Philistine when he can't even trust his own son? When his own closest friend, Ahithophel, has turned against him? How can he trust a Philistine with his army? It shows what a unique man David was. David was able to recognize good character even when it's in a stranger. In fact, I want to take just a moment to read this to you because David gives Ittai the opportunity to turn back, to go back to his country. He said, you're a stranger. There's no reason for you to get involved in this. Listen, these are the words of Ittai. He says, and I'm reading from 2 Samuel 15:21, as the Lord lives, and as my Lord the king lives, in whatever place my Lord the king shall be, whether in death or life, even there also your servant will be. Wow, those are powerful words. It almost sounds like the words that Ruth gave to her mother-in-law Naomi in the book of Ruth, when she makes that kind of a vow to him, but to her mother-in-law. But this is what Ittai is saying. I'll die for you. I'll give my life for you. I don't know how they came to that kind of relationship. I just find it extremely unusual that an Israelite king is trusting a Philistine general on the worst day of his life and puts actually 1/3 of his army under him. The point that I want to make concerning this is, if you're going to be successful in leadership, you need to surround yourself with different kinds of people. That's one of the greatest weaknesses that I see in a lot of churches. Everybody looks alike, talks alike, acts alike. That's not the way it was in Jesus' case. I was reading a story concerning Billy Graham by his brother-in-law, and he was telling about some of the experiences that he had on the Billy Graham team. And Billy Graham has been one of my heroes. He's one that did it right, walked with kings, and yet remained humble. Billy Graham is a great man of God, and he, of course, is very afflicted now. He's not able to hardly even get out of bed. He's so afflicted, but a great man of God. And this is what his brother-in-law said of Billy Graham. He said, I worked for him for 18 years. And he said, Billy Graham was such a great leader that we came from all kinds of different denominational backgrounds. We were all kinds. We weren't just one denomination. We were all different types. We not only came from different denominations, we came from different nations and different races of people. And yet he said, never one time did I hear Billy Graham's team get into an argument over theology, get into an argument about the Bible, because he said Billy Graham was such a great leader, he kept us focused on our goal. Our goal is evangelism. Our goal is to tell the lost about Jesus Christ. And so even though we come from all these different backgrounds of denominations, countries, different ethnic groups of people, we never quarreled about doctrine because we were focused on what God had called us to do. Well, that's great leadership. And only great leaders are able to pull it off that successfully. But that's what Jesus did. You look at those that followed Jesus, what a diverse background that he chose different people from. As I said, when you choose only one kind of people to surround yourself with, there's a lot of weaknesses to that. So on the worst day of David's life, he's got a Philistine general that is leading 1/3 of his army. Here's the second thing that I see of his friends. And I call it honor your friend. Not only reward the stranger, not only put him in his rightful place, but your friends, Here is a man by the name of Hushai. He is David's friend. And that's what the Bible describes him. David's friend. Hushai was a man that was willing to do whatever David asked him to do. See, good leadership is not possible without good friends, about people that will take your cause and help you to fulfill it. You can't fulfill the vision alone. You got to have help. Hushai was that kind of man for David. David knew that he needed to know what was going on with Absalom in Jerusalem. How's he going to get that information? It's got to be somebody he can trust. You can't make good decisions without good information. Where's he going to get this kind of information? David made the decision, I'm going to ask Hushai to help me get the information about what Absalom is doing. If I can get somebody I can trust. I remember reading the story of Winston Churchill in World War II, and somebody said, Mr. Churchill, how can you go to sleep at night when your soldiers are fighting in Africa, in Europe? How can you sleep? And he said, as long as I know what the facts are, I can sleep. It's when I don't know what is going on. That's when I get nervous. And so this is what David is doing. He's putting Hushai, and he says to him, Hushai is saying, I'm going to go with you. And he said, please, if you go with me, it's just going to be one more mouth to feed. If you go with me, it's just one more person that I've got to watch after. What I need you to do is go back to Jerusalem, and there you obtain the information that is going on in Absalom's inner circle. Send me that information. He said, you've got the two sons of the high priest. They can help you. And that's what he did. He used them as couriers to send the information to David to tell David what to do. So if we're going to have good information in our life, we've got to have friends, people we can trust, people that will lay down their lives for us. Hushai said, okay, that's what I will do. I will go back and I will pretend to be a servant to Absalom, whatever he wants me to do, because he was known to be a counselor for David. When he returned, of course, Absalom, he challenged him. He said, you're my father's friend? Why are you still here? And he said, oh, no. Whoever the people have chosen to be king, that is my king. And I will serve you just like I've served your father. Absalom bought it. And so because of that, David was able to get the information that he needed out of Jerusalem to make the right decisions. We all need good friends to be around us. Ahithophel gives Absalom counsel. He tells Absalom, I want to take 3,000 men and I will destroy David tonight. And once he is dead, we don't have to worry about the revolution anymore. It will be over. Hushai heard the advice that Ahithophel gave. He knew it was going to be disastrous for David. And so he goes in and meets with Absalom, and he uses all these flowery words. I tell you, when you listen to his speech, he knew how to talk. And so he's using all these flowery words and adjectives and building Absalom up in his own pride and making him feel like he's this great general. No. He said, we don't need to send Ahithophel out to do. You are our leader. You're our king. And you should lead us to war. Let's gather. And he starts calling things like, let's gather the soldiers like the sand of the sea. I mean, he's using all these flowery words. But in reality, what he is doing, he's trapping Absalom in his own pride. Because of Absalom's pride, he believes the bad counsel of Hushai rather than believing the good counsel of Ahithophel. He receives the bad counsel of Hushai rather than the good counsel of Ahithophel. So what God does, and the Bible said it was because the Lord had decided he would defeat Absalom. Absalom believes the bad counsel. Don't ever forget it. It was because of David's friend, Hushai, that Absalom believed the wrong counsel. So it's impossible to lead without a good circle of friends. Let's talk about another circle of friends. Listen to wise counsel. They go into battle, the battle that Hushai had described, and they bring all these soldiers together. And the Bible said the soldiers, the men of Absalom, were defeated before the men of David. They are being defeated and they're fleeing. And Absalom, of course, you know the story, how that his hair became caught in the thicket of the tree. And the mule that's under him runs away and he's left hanging by his own hair, and Joab goes with his men, and they take 3 darts, and they thrust them through the heart of Absalom, and he dies hanging by his own hair in a tree. A terrible ending for the life of Absalom. But David, when he hears the news that his son is dead, David is heartbroken. In fact, David had counseled his generals, saying, deal gently with the young man. What's David doing? David is falling into the trap of his own sentimentality. He's thinking like a father here that has failed. I failed Absalom. If there's any way possible, don't kill Absalom. Now, Joab is thinking like a soldier. Joab is thinking like a military man, and he's saying, there is no way. This man is trying to kill you. This man has caused, no telling, hundreds of people have already died because of this insurrection and rebellion. And so he's thinking like a military man, and he's saying, you can't do that. He knew that it wasn't possible. When David gets the word that Absalom is dead, and he probably heard also, of course, that it was Joab and his men that killed Absalom, David is very, very heartbroken. And the words are just, they're pitiful words as he climbs the stairs. This is a public appearance. The people see him climbing the stairwell around the tower, going up to his room, and he's crying as he goes and saying, oh, Absalom, Absalom, would to God I had died for you, Absalom. He's crying from his heart, but David's wrong. Joab confronts him concerning this. David is angry, probably very angry even at Absalom. But what David is trying to do is something that is impossible to be done. He could not restore Absalom back again. It was too late for that. Too late for it. Now listen very carefully. Anyone that is involved in a leadership position lives in what they call a glass house. What do they mean by that? They mean people are watching you. Oh, I can remember this so much in those days as pastor, church, great church, hundreds of people that are there. And I knew that anything happened, anything took place, everybody looks at me sitting on the platform. What's pastor thinking? What's pastor saying? They're all watching. You have to learn how to hide your emotions. You're just as human as anybody else. You're going to cry. Do your crying privately, not publicly. Because the people are all watching, and you are representing God. It's very interesting when the high priest Aaron was being ordained by Moses the prophet and put in his position, he and his 4 sons. God gave specific orders to them. They were not to cry at the death of a funeral, at a funeral. They were not to cry at a funeral. Someone in their family has died unless it was their immediate kin, mother, father, wife, child. They weren't to cry if it was a favorite uncle. They weren't to cry. Why? Because they were representing God. And they had to represent God with dignity. Now, a lot of people don't understand it, but from a leadership perspective, I understand it very well. Because the moment anything happens, people look at you. What do? You just sit there. You show no emotion. You don't cry. You don't do anything. You just sit there. David is failing in this, and Joab knows it. David is thinking like a father, and he's crying because his son is dead. But leaders don't live in a vacuum. Everybody's watching. Their life is on public display. And so what Joab does, Joab goes in and he confronts him and says, what you're doing is wrong. In fact, this is the way he said it. If you continue doing what you're doing, you're shaming the people that have given their life to protect you. And I mean, he was really rough in his words. He said, I understand this day, if Absalom had lived and all your men had died, you would be happy. Well, I mean, you could tell he was upset with it, but what he's saying is true. David, you've got to get hold of yourself. You've got to control your emotions. Wow. One of the toughest things I've ever had to do in my life. my daughter's wedding. Boy, that's hard. Hard. I can remember in the wedding, and of course she's insisting her daddy do the wedding, and man, I'm praying, oh God, please help me. And you just have to steel yourself. You feel, your stomach feels like a rock, a knot inside you. You got to be in control. If you lose control, and here we are in the middle of the wedding, and I felt God had given me a special word to give to her and her husband, and so I'm giving that. She starts crying, and I'm saying, oh God, help me. If I start crying, we'll never get this thing done. My mother's funeral, man, that was a tough one. That was very hard for me to do. But my mama insisted, I want you to preach my funeral. Oh, my daughters say, Daddy, you cry easier than you used to. And that's true, because life will either harden you or it will soften you. It will tenderize you. And I do. But there's sometimes you can't allow yourself to cry. You got to wait until you get alone, and then you do your crying. We're human too as leaders, but as a leader, your life is on display. And that's what Joab was challenging him. He said, if you don't go back out there and greet your soldiers and honor them, they've risked their lives for you. You don't go back out, they will start leaving you, and by tomorrow, you won't have an army. Boy, his words were right. The men already, the Bible said that they were slipping away like they were AWOL, absent without leave, like they were deserting. They felt guilty, like they had done something wrong because Absalom was dead. It wasn't their fault that Absalom was dead. That was Absalom's choice. Absalom's the one that set that up. And so it doesn't matter that David is daddy. He's also king. And he's got to get a control of his emotions. And so the Bible said he listened to him. I'm glad he did. He went out and he greeted his soldiers. He thanked them for what they had done, because they had sacrificed and risked their lives to save him that day. And even though Absalom is dead, David still must be the king and represent God. That's a tough one to do. But David did it after Joab challenged him concerning it. Let me give you another one that I see concerning this. Well, I have some more points there concerning the same thing I was saying. He wanted to save Absalom. When he learned that Absalom was dead, he began to mourn publicly. Let me click through my points here. Joab confronts him and made David think of his people rather than himself. All right, let me talk about a fourth one. The fourth one I see, forgive your enemy. David understood this is a good day. This is a day of celebration. If we're going to bring back the king, it's not a bad day, not a day of judgment. It's a good day to celebrate. There's a story that is given here. When David was fleeing from Absalom, fleeing away, there's a man by the name of Shimei. We never heard of him before. We didn't even know he existed. But he shows up. Some people will show up on the worst day of your life. That's what happens for David. Shimei shows up, and he's throwing rocks, throwing dirt, and cursing David. He is accusing David of killing King Saul. Now, that wasn't true. David never killed King Saul. He never attacked King Saul. So it's really not the rocks and the dirt. That's just symbolic. But it's the words that were so bad. And again, it shows the heart of David. David's nephews, Joab and his brothers, said to David, just give the word and we'll go take the head off of that dead dog. That's what they called him. A dead dog. We'll take his head off. And David said, no. Don't do that. God has permitted this. God has allowed it. God is watching. And maybe if I show mercy, if I show the right attitude, God will show mercy to me. Boy, David really understood God's heart, didn't he? So now that the insurrection is over, Absalom is dead. The armies have come back together and they've said, let's bring David back to Jerusalem. They come down to the Jordan River, and as they cross across the Jordan River, guess who the first person is to come greet King David? Shimei. Shimei. The man we never heard of before, the man that cursed him, the man that threw rocks at him, the man that threw dirt at him, the man that lied about him, that slandered him. He's the first one there repenting. Oh, I'm sorry for what I did. Please forgive me. Oh boy. If you're going to lead, you got to learn to deal with all kinds of people. Shimei was quick to condemn, but he's quick to repent. And so he comes before David, repenting for what he has done. And David says, I'm going to forgive you for what you did. I'm going to forgive you, and you are not going to die. He promised him, I will forgive you. But then he holds him accountable. I think that is a delicate balance for leaders. It's very hard to get this one right. To forgive people, shake hands with them, but say, okay, you're still held accountable for what you did because it was wrong. In this case, what he says, he said to his son Solomon, as Solomon becomes the king, you know what Shimei did to me. Now you put him to test. And he did. He said, okay, this is what Solomon told Shimei. You come and live with me in Jerusalem where I can watch you. You live here where I can keep an eye on you. And the day that you leave this city, you have signed your death sentence. Well, 2 years went by and everything's going good. And then a couple of Shimei's servants ran away. And he hears that they're down at the city of Gath, I believe it was, in Philistine territory. He goes down to get them and brings them back. Solomon's watching, and he sent word and said, brings him, didn't I tell you to stay in Jerusalem? Didn't I tell you that the day that you left you would be executed? So he showed mercy, but he held him accountable. It showed that Shimei had never truly ever repented, never had submitted to proper authority. So if we're going to lead, we've got to learn how to forgive the people that do us wrong. Forgive the Shimei's, but at the same time, hold them accountable. Now here's the fifth group of people I want to talk about. The fifth group of people are the people that blessed David on the worst time of his life, when he's fleeing from Absalom. There's actually three men that are listed here. A man by the name of Shobi. He is from Rabbah, which was a city of Ammon. That's not an Israelite city. In fact, David had sent his soldiers and had captured that city. But Shobi, when he learns about David fleeing from Absalom, he sends a gift to help him. Here's another man that helped him. It's Maker. You remember the story of Mephibosheth? Same Maker from Lodebar. It would be across in what we would call the land of Jordan today, on the other side of the Jordan. And he comes bringing a gift to help David. And then there is a third man that comes. This man is Barzillai. Barzillai was an old man, 80 years old. Now that particularly was old in the days of David. Most men didn't live to be 80 years of age. But he's a wealthy man, a very wealthy man, and he comes and brings of his riches to feed David's household. He brings animals for them to ride upon. He is a great help to David during this time. Now, this is why I say you need to pay attention to those that have blessed you. Don't forget to bless them. When people have been good to you, yes, you are indebted to them. Never forget to say thanks. I deal with missionaries all the time around the world, and one of the things I've noticed about a lot of missionaries that they present their projects, but once the project is done, they never come back to say thank you. And I tell them over and over again, your project is not completed until the people that helped you feel thanked. I believe that very strongly. Excuse me. Until the people that have helped you, they blessed you, it's your responsibility to bless them. Now, something significant that I notice in this. These three men, Shobi, Maker, Barzillai, not one of them is an Israelite. They're all strangers. They are from the surrounding countries. None of them are Israelites. Now, that it shows what a great leader David was. That his influence just wasn't with his family. His influence just wasn't with his own people, the Israelites. His influence went outside of Israel. And when he is fleeing from Absalom, Absalom is trying to kill him. It's three foreigners that are the ones that come to help him. When David starts returning back to Israel again, he mentions these three men by name. He sends special gifts and special thank you. In fact, to Barzillai, he says to him, come with me and live with me in Jerusalem. And Barzillai said, I'm an old man. And I can't enjoy the food. I can't enjoy all the things that you have there at the royal palace. But here's my grandson. And David said, that's fine. I'll take your grandson and I'll treat him like my son because you helped me on the most difficult day of my life. See, this is the way that David was able to survive it. It wasn't just God's help. Many times we think of that. It was God, and it was. But God uses people. It's relationships. It's the people that you surround yourself with. And because David had surrounded himself with strangers like the Philistine general, I wonder how different the story would have been if Ittai the Gittite had not been there to help him. He surrounds himself with friends like Hushai. He surrounds himself like these three men that they're not Israelites, but they are his friends. And they are there to help him when his own son is trying to kill him. The Bible puts it like this. It's one of the wise proverbs. It says, a neighbor that it is at hand. In other words, a good neighbor next door is better than a brother that lives a long way, miles away. That's a good statement. A neighbor, somebody at hand. Build friendships, build relationships with the people that are around you, whether they are of your family or not. That's what David does. Don't forget the friends that make leadership possible. You're never going to be able to do it alone. God never intended that. In fact, this is what I've discovered. Everything lasting in life is built upon relationships. Everything. And so we should put value upon that. That's what makes family important. It's not that they just gave us life, but it's the relationship that we have there. But that's what makes the local church very important. But don't just build relationship just with family, friends, the local church. Build relationships with people wherever you can find them. If you can find good people, build relationships, even though they may be different than you. You can learn from them. One of the things I've discovered in life is we learn the most from people that are not like us. I have two very wonderful friends. One of them is dead now, and the other one, talking to him just last week, and he was asking me, would you preach my funeral when I'm gone? These two men have helped me more than anybody else in ministry. One was a Jamaican. He was black as that lady's shirt, her blouse there. Just little short. Man, I miss him. I miss him terribly. He died 10 years ago. And then the other one is a Mexican. He's brown skinned. They're different than me. But the African taught me how to understand African people. The brown one, the Mexican, taught me how to understand the Hispanic culture. If you're going to be able to influence people, if you're going to be able to do something for God, you got to surround yourself with other people. Don't just look for people like you. They probably don't know any more than you do. Look for people that are different than you. That's what David did. And I think it is why he was able to survive this terrible time with Absalom.